But otherwise, it's a basic white half-track, exactly the same as we used in the war in 1860.
Now, this weird and wonderful little tank going around now, this tank is something called the Matilda I. Perhaps not the type of Matilda you're used to seeing. The Matilda II, that was one we were using in the desert. And we have an example in the rather jazzy quarter camouflage scheme on display. This particular one, this is a Matilda I that was originally designed by Sir John Carden in 1935 to meet a requirement for the first infantry tank. In other words, to help the infantry advance against a prepared position. So it's actually got very, very thick armour. It was supposed to be able to cross what was known at the time as the shelled area. In other words, where high explosive rounds might be going off, it needed that level of protection, and it's only got a Vickers machine gun in the turret because that's all they thought it would need to suppress enemy fire, enemy positions, and allow our infantry to advance onto the target.
The infantry tank Mark I's powered by a Ford V8 engine. Only on this one we swapped it over. We had to get this restored from a wreck, and it's using a Rover engine now. It only has a two-man crew, the driver obviously down in the front and the gunner, commander in the turret with the machine gun. It's very limited. It was really designed for use en masse against Germans in fixed positions, which the Germans, the rotters, wouldn't do. They wouldn't line up in fixed positions and wait to be shot, which is very unfair really, but that's how it works out. The tanks were used by 4th and 7th Royal Tank Regiments in France with the British Expeditionary Force, and thankfully never used again by the British Army.
Now, the next tank coming on, this one is one of those tanks that actually came to our rescue early in the war. This is the American Stuart, this particular version, M3A1 version of their light tank. They'd started designing light tanks in America way back in 1933, but the American system really was, if a war had come, they would throw resource and money at the problem, and the American army at that period was a tiny army, very, very small, but they did start some mechanical development, starting to look at building tanks. And when these particular tanks first arrived with British forces in North Africa, famously a soldier called one of these a honey, because they were so good, they were so reliable compared to many of our own tanks at the time. And that in itself, it was a name that stuck. So in British service, a number of these were called honeys. The official name, we called them after American generals, so officially it was a Stuart M3. Designed by the Americans as really a light tank, when they came into British service, we were using them almost as infantry tanks or as cruiser tanks, rushing forward in waves to attack the Germans, and consequently, first of all in North Africa, they suffered very heavy casualties.
The Stuart's powered by a 7-cylinder Continental radial engine in the back, basically like an aircraft engine, and it's air-cooled, and that's what gives the Stuart its great power. The suspension is a version of the vertical volute used on the Sherman, so it has no interference with the inside of the hull at all. The other odd thing about the tank is that the gun has a certain amount of wiggle separate from rotating the turret, and can move the gun a tiny bit left and right to pick up a target.
Now back to a British vehicle, a contemporary British vehicle. This is a Valentine tank coming on now. And it's a tank we can often overlook, but actually the Valentine was a tank we made the most of in Britain during World War II. And over 2,500 Valentines were also supplied to Russia as well, as supporting the Russian army. Most of those Valentines were actually made by the Canadians and shipped across to support the Russian forces. It starts off with its role really was to be another infantry tank, but we end up using it as a cruiser tank, and it starts off with a 2-pounder gun, so a relatively small gun. This is a later model, the Mark IX model, and it's actually got a 6-pounder gun. And this particular vehicle that was driving around used to be a gate guard out in Northern Ireland, but originally we think it was done out of a boat there at one point. Fairly empty inside, but it was restored by Vickers some years ago to rank order. And back in about 2003, I think it was, they handed it over to the Tank Museum as a gift. And it's a really important vehicle, really, of British tank production, so it's good we've got a running example that we can show off to you.
The Valentine's normally powered by a General Motors diesel, and if you look at it as it goes by, you'll see it has markings on it of 23rd Armoured Brigade. They chose the sign of the liver bird, the mythical Liverpool bird, and that appears on a white square with next to it the red and white number showing its position in the regiment within the division. But that's what that is, it's a divisional sign, and then the selection of the regiment is measured by the number on that red square. So that's how you tell when they're going around.
Now the next vehicle coming on to the arena, it's a guest vehicle, privately owned, and has been brought here. It's a bit of a rarity. It had a bit of engine trouble yesterday, but hopefully it'll make it around the arena today. This vehicle is a Czechoslovakian vehicle that was designed back in 1938, and it was put together. The Czechs, don't forget, after it's a new country. After the First World War with the Versailles Peace Treaty, Czechoslovakia was surrounded by countries that really looked at it with, they weren't particularly friendly. So Czechoslovakia built up quite a large arms industry. And when that arms industry was taken over by the Germans in late 38, they basically inherited, the Germans, quite a number of tanks, including this one, which they put into service, and they called the 38T. And it makes up a large proportion of their tank force when they invade France in 1940, and the following year, some estimates, about a quarter of the German tank force that invades Russia in June of 1941 are Czech tanks. So it's one of those vehicles that was very important early in the war, and it was carried on being built throughout the war, but they used different types of armament on the top. They made some assault guns on it, and through various permutations it became the Hetzer, which you can see an example of that inside the museum.
It's powered by a Praga 6-cylinder engine, and the suspension is, although it could be anything behind those big wheels, is actually a form of leaf spring. It's said to have given the crew a very, very harsh ride. And I don't think it's going to make it all the way round. It looks like it's going to try and get off in one go now, actually. I wouldn't blame you.